Hello. I would like to make a video about a forecast of the future that I'd like to make. There's a lot of people on the internet talking about the future right now, particularly because of the development of AI and the potential disruptiveness of AI. And while I do think this is warranted, I do think that this is rational animation. I have this guy's video up because he talks about this sort of thing a lot. I just watched one of his videos. Let me look at my history here. About long-termism, right? He is a very optimistic person, right? He believes that, well, humanity could maybe survive trillions of years into the future, and like he has this idea like, oh, well, maybe AI will become benevolent angels for us. And the prediction I'd like to make here in this video is that that is basically impossible. And the reason is this curve, okay? This hyper-exponential curve of progress, right? Now, you might wonder why this is bad or why this is startling, right? And you might look at the tabs that I have open here and wonder what I'm about to talk about. Yes, I'm going to talk about nuclear bombs, and that is one part of it, right? And I want to illustrate my main talking point here with the example of nuclear weapons. Okay, think for a moment about the development of nuclear weapons and the proliferation, particularly, of nuclear weapons and the threat that that poses to the future of humanity. Nuclear proliferation means that there are more people with nukes. More people with nukes means that the humanity as a whole is more delicate, especially if one person's stockpile is enough to, say, destroy half of the planet. I don't literally mean blow up half of the sphere of the Earth, oblates Freud. I mean, like, make vast portions uninhabitable for large periods of time. Even 1 year of uninhabitability or not being able to grow crops could be a death nail for our civilization. Now I want you to think for a moment about what this curve implies directly about nuclear proliferation. What does this curve here imply about this technology? Well, if we know anything, if we are to take these trends and extrapolate them out onto nuclear weapons, we can see that nuclear weapons will become more powerful, they will become easier to make, and they will become more accessible, basically, to more and more people over time. If this trend is to be believed, within maybe even 100 years, every person might be able to own their very own nuclear stockpile, larger than the United States ever had during the 20th century. Okay? If this trend is to be believed. Obviously, that would be catastrophic. If nuclear weapons become so easy to make, for instance, because we've invented the replicator, that's why I looked this up, if nuclear weapons become easy to make, humanity ends, right? If someone finds out a way that, oh, hey, it turns out that there's a super easy way to make plutonium bombs, and all you need is some duct tape and some rubber ducks and some soap, and bada bing, bada boom, you make it, right? Now, obviously you can't make a nuclear weapon with rubber ducks, soap, and duct tape. I'm saying that imagine that supplies as common and accessible as those are all you need, right? Then humanity ends. There's no argument there. And there is no defense that we can imagine, right? And even if there was a defense, the idea of that defense being deployed fast enough might not happen, right? If a defense comes in time, then we're saved from nuclear weapons in particular. But think again, right, about this trend, right? It's not just nuclear weapons posing a threat to us. Look here at the germ theory of disease, right? And, penicillin and stuff like that. Biological advancement, right? Advancements in biology also pose a threat to us. We have imagined the idea of fantastic bioweapons, right? People have suspected that COVID-19 was a bioweapon. I don't know if that's true or not, but I'm not talking about COVID-19. I'm saying here that there's other things than just nuclear weapons that we need to worry about. Things that we regard right now as being things that only nation-state actors can work with, like nuclear weapons, smallpox variants, or customized super bugs, right? Super diseases. Those things might eventually become accessible enough to people that individual people or small groups can develop basically terribly destructive weapons and negatively affect all of humanity. Now, it doesn't actually require a malevolent actor, right? Someone who has even purely positive intent may accidentally make something that causes, someone may kick the ball down the road, right? They may invent something that they have the intention of using peacefully, right? So everybody knows the history of Alfred Nobel and dynamite, right? Alfred Nobel regretted his basically invention of dynamite, right? He developed a blasting cap, right? He invented dynamite, right? According to what I understand, right? And according to this, right? And known for inventing dynamite, right? And he created the Nobel Peace Prize because he was so ashamed of the fact that he was known as a slaughterer of men, right? So someone who invents something that that may initially seem to be, harmless. They may make a discovery, they may make an invention that initially seems harmless or entirely benevolent, could eventually be a stepping stone towards something that is incredibly harmful, right? I hope that I don't need to explain to you, for instance, how this has already kind of happened with nuclear energy, right? Our study of the atom, right? Our study of basically the periodic table has led us to be able to create nuclear bombs, right? When people were initially creating the periodic table, let's look up discovery of the periodic table. As I recall, I think it was a Russian guy who first came up with the arrangement that we have today, but I'm not sure. That he figured out like maybe he's a French person, I don't remember. But anyway, basically, people were initially studying the elements, and they had no way of knowing that was a stepping stone towards being able to construct nuclear weapons. And I don't think they really had a reason to believe at the time that it would be. But now we have a little bit more knowledge, and we have a little bit of hindsight, right? And now we know that people who studied, early physics, early chemistry, contributed to the creation of this threat to humanity. I predict, and this is my forecast, that this kind of thing happening, right, where people make an advancement and that advancement leads to something potentially catastrophic, like the periodic table eventually leading to the atomic bomb, that kind of thing is going to get far, far worse, right? Technologies are going to get more disruptive. They're going to get far more impactful. They're going to get harder to control. And we're going to go back to the replicator for a moment, right? If we had the replicator, right, and there is a huge economic and basically a massive incentive almost in every way to invent the replicator, right? The ability to transmute matter from one atomic structure into another, to create custom molecules en masse, which is basically. Now, I think the replicator in Star Trek in-universe doesn't actually work that way. I think it creates it from energy or something. But imagine for a moment that it's matter transmutation, right? Basically, it's the ability to create matter from basically nothing, right? You can just maybe turn air into a cup of tea, right? The ability to do something like that would be completely impossible to control. It would be completely impossible to prevent people from. They could just replicate more replicators, right? Once you've built one replicator, you can use it to replicate more replicators, right? As long as you've got the power, I guess, right? You've got the manufacturing ability to, manufacture one replicator to start with, and then have that replicator replicate the parts, and then build another one using the parts replicated by the replicator. Or maybe the way the replicator in the real world will work is to, maybe you could literally have a replicator replicate an entire replicator in place, right? if someone invents the replicator, there is no going back. There is no removing it from human ability, right? And obviously, right, if you could replicate anything, you could replicate uranium-238. You could replicate plutonium, right? So obviously, the replicator would be a massively disruptive and, quite frankly, awful technology for humanity to have, right? It would probably, within just a few years, lead to the destruction of everything and everyone we know. Now, I don't think that the replicator is a close-by technology, right? It could be something that we invent within 400 years. It could be within the next 500 years, but I don't know, right? I have no idea what would go into it. I don't think we're even anywhere near where could even begin to fathom how a real-life replicator could work. My point only is that this trend here is going to produce amazingly, fantastically disruptive and unusual technologies that have strange effects on us, right? That may be catastrophic, either intentionally or unintentionally. Another example I'd like to give you of a disruptive technology that was perhaps unintentional is the smartphone, right? And the thing I'd like to talk about that is an unintended side effect is smartphone addiction, right? The initial invention of the iPhone, the original iPhone, right, was when Steve Jobs initially showed off the original iPhone to the world. He probably could not have predicted in any way the incredible negative effects that smartphone addiction, that social media addiction, all that would have on the world, right? Perhaps people at that time could have looked at, early MySpace or whatever and tried to project out and maybe have guessed that something like this would have happened. But in effect, basically, the fact that everyone can have a super accessible, easy to use, addictive device, frankly, in their pocket at all times has led to this catastrophic change in how we interact. People don't go dating anymore. They just go on dating apps and they talk to other people on dating apps. They're addicted to texting, all that sort of stuff, right? It's significantly changed how people interact with each other in a way that nothing else in the past really has. Not even the internet itself. Has had as much of a drastic impact on the world as the smartphone. Now, the smartphone is not world-ending, at least not yet. But it is an example of a technology that did not seem all that significant or amazing when it came out. There were PDAs before that, like the Palm Pilot, right? I don't want to say no one, okay. Not many people were addicted to their Palm Pilots. My mom had a Palm Pilot. This is closer to what my mom ones looked like, right? These PDA things are like the predecessor to the smartphone, right? And the Apple Newton, right? Apple Newton, that's another example of one of these old PDA devices, right? The idea of a small touchscreen device was not new, right? It's just that this amazing development of smartphones being, that much better. They had a nice screen. They had relatively nice speakers. Compared to today's smartphones, they're pretty crap, but, okay-ish, right? This is a technological development that at the time probably did not seem all that significant. Okay, that's not, I mean this, right? The advancement from this you know what it is? I don't have the iPhone picture anymore. The advancement from the Apple Newton to the original iPhone. Let's get the picture of him holding it again. To the original iPhone. No one at the time probably would have been able to predict, at least not with clarity, not with certainty, that it would lead to this amazing, horrible outcome of smartphone addiction and iPad kids. We're basically finding out right now what happens when children grow up their whole lives with iPads in their hands, right? I say that myself, by the way, as a person who grew up on a laptop, right? So I mean, as a 6-year-old, I was using Neopets and playing Flash games and stuff, but we're basically amplifying the level of accessibility and stuff like that, and technology is becoming easier to access, more addictive over time. It's becoming more predatory, right? So let's look up gotcha games. Oh boy! So basically, we have a gambling epidemic, right? Everything is gambling now, right? And it's all thanks to smartphones, right? Well, at least partially, right? Right? So here it is again, right? People compulsively gamble online now, right? And part of the reason they do that is that these app stores, the original iPhone, you remember it had the App Store, right? Is promoting apps that have gambling mechanics in them, like loot boxes. That was something that you might remember was a huge area of controversy a few years ago, right? It might be regulated in the EU now, I don't know, but and actually this is a pretty good example of that curve that I spoke about, right? Let's look at that. Let's look at that curve again. This is this curve. If you think about the acceleration of this curve, this little spot right here where we get mobile devices, right? And we get loot crates and stuff. Loot crates and the gamification of video games and children getting addicted to gambling through video games is something that happens so fast. It happens so fast on this spike that laws and regulations and whatnot did not have time to catch up, right? And so as a result, we've had, I think, 20 years-ish, I'd say, of children growing up with on gambling, right? Through their iPhone addiction, or I guess most of them probably have Androids since iPhones are really expensive, So we have clear and present examples in the present day and in the recent past of technologies, of discoveries that seemed harmless or seemed relatively mundane that ended up contributing to or directly causing immense disruptive power, right? This is one that's in the grand scheme of things recent past, right? 1833 isn't all that long ago, right? The 1800s were only a couple hundred years ago, right? Along this curve that's only like here-ish, right? So so if there's one thing I want you to take away from this video, it's that the advancement of technology poses an existential risk. The advancement of our understanding alone, the advancement of humanity's understanding poses an existential risk to our survival as a species. And we have clear and present examples, not only of major things. Okay, hold on. Major examples, right? Like the nuke, like the nuclear bomb. We also have examples of, minor versions of this, right? Like loot boxes, like people being addicted to iPhones, like iPad kids. I argue that as we climb this curve, we're going to see more drastic negative effects like this. We're going to see more and more that technology is disruptive. Technology is, destroying any form of tradition, right? It happens too fast for regulators to regulate. It looks like things that came before it, but actually something is just a little bit different enough that it happens to produce this, So, when people, there have been PDAs for like 20, 30 years, right? When the first iPhone came out, right? When the first iPhone came out, right? No one probably would have looked at this and thought that this versus this was a big enough difference that this would produce this, Okay, no one probably would have realized that at the time, right? And I get it, right? The iPad is not exactly the same as the iPhone, but whatever, right? It's the same basic technology. It is an evolution of this that and this evolved into this, and then this evolved into this. Things are going to get crazy, right? They're going to get crazy. They're going to get crazy really fast, and then things will explode. I hope you guys enjoyed. Thanks for watching.